I have lived in some unusual places, some unusual homes. Maybe the weirdest was the one that orbited Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. And one thing you miss when your home is a spaceship is a thermostat on the wall. If I was hot or cold, I had to radio mission control and request a temperature change. It's a small but unforgettable reminder of how easy and modern our home energy systems are now. But today we have to face the next step, making our homes safer and smarter and more energy efficient for a future of growing common needs and growing risks. Today I'm speaking with Michele Harradence. She's the Executive Vice President of Enbridge Inc. and President of Enbridge Gas. She's a leader helping us reshape how millions of us experience energy at home. This is On Energy. Michele, thank you very much for being a guest on Energy.
Oh, thanks, Chris. I'm excited to be here today.
And why the energy business? What sparked your initial passion to make this what you wanted to work on?
Well, that's a great question. I think it probably started in 1980. We moved to Mississauga, and we had what actually I'm sure you and I will talk about today. We had hybrid heating. We had a heat pump and we had a natural gas furnace. And I remember my dad explaining to me how it worked because, first of all, we had never had air conditioning before, so that was pretty exciting. And then we had this natural gas furnace, and he explained how when it got really cold, the natural gas would kick on and make sure that we stayed warm.
Interesting that part of your inspiration came when you had two types of heating brought into your home. A combination of natural gas and a heat pump. So, a lot of people spend time thinking about their energy bill and how they're controlling and how they're bringing energy into your home. But is that what keeps you engaged now? You've risen to the highest level within a very large energy company. But what is it that at this stage then continues to keep you interested and engage in the energy problems and energy solutions of the world?
Sure. Well, that's a good point. If you bring it back to those fundamentals, I often speak about that food, energy, and water nexus. Those are the three, in my mind, fundamental building blocks you need. A couple of years ago, my daughter, who has a degree in economics now, was talking about writing a paper and thinking through, and it was looking at a civics course at Africa. And she was like, what should I talk about? And I said, talk about food, energy, and water. Those are those fundamental things that a society needs. If they have access to food, they have access to water, they have access to energy. That makes all the difference. So if we talk about us in North America, we have that. We're incredibly privileged in North America. We have secure, almost every North American has access to secure water, food, and energy. There's obviously varying levels of it, but that's fundamental to developing our prosperity.
Sure.
So if you think of how energy, it changes that for folks. We like to talk about balancing four things. We talk about that affordability, the resilience or the reliability. Is it there when you need it? We like to talk about the sustainability of it. And more, we're talking about the security of your energy. I mean, with what we've had happen in the world over the last several years, it's not something that everybody can take for granted, even in some of the, I would say, more prosperous countries that we're used to seeing. So is it affordable? Is it sustainable? Is it reliable? And is your energy secure?
It's places that are exceedingly hot or exceedingly cold. And so I do want to address that a little bit, and that is where we live and where we work. In order to make it comfortable and workable, it's going to take energy. And so maybe we'll start with what are the different ways of supplying energy to our home in North America, and looking at what's it like in your home or your office, and what do you think about? As someone who's so deeply into the energy industry, what do you think about when you turn on a light in your office or you turn on the oven at your home? What's going on in your head as to how that system works?
Well, I probably do think about it quite a bit more than the average person does. I think the average person in Canada or the US takes it for granted. And that's something I don't know that we've done ourselves a service as the energy industry to not talk about it more. And it is complex, and maybe that's why we avoid it. But making sure folks understand it's not something to be taken for granted. But, the average day we get up, we have a shower, for example. I used to work more closely with our assets in British Columbia, and we have a big pipeline that runs from the northern part of BC, from the Yukon Northwest Territory, all the way down through Vancouver to the US border. And we used to talk about the morning pull, and we would watch for it, and it would start around 5:30 in the morning, and that was when everybody was getting up. They were turning the heat up. They were starting their showers, and we would have a morning pull on the gas system because we were, of course, feeding the gas utilities in Victoria and Vancouver, and a lot of the gas continued on to the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. So, folks, that's the first thing they're doing for energy is having their showers. In that case, many with their water heated by natural gas. Electricity, of course, though, is big, and across North America, we have interesting ways of getting electricity, and we're more and more, I would say, electrifying our lives, whether that's for our EVs or, the stat that I like to refer to is I think they say the average chat GPT search is about 17 times, 15 to 17 times the energy requirement of the average Google search. So in Canada, for example, electricity, we're incredibly fortunate to have a lot of good natural resources that help us with electricity and to have invested in some great technologies. I'm here in Ontario. We have a very strong nuclear program in Ontario. As a mechanical engineer, I'm a big fan of nuclear. I think it's absolutely the more we can do with that. And we have that in a couple of provinces here in Canada and several states in the US. Also blessed with hydropower in Canada. So British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, lots of their electricity is generated again through our natural resources with hydropower, and we have some of that in the US as well. We have abundant natural gas in North America, so a lot of natural gas-fired generation. We have wind, we have solar, we have biofuels. We have, of course, some coal-fired generation in North America as well. And we talk about that a lot. It really is, as we've moved over the decades or even the centuries, you talked earlier about our use of energy, we haven't really ramped down on any of the things we use. We still use wood in some cases. We're just always demanding more energy. So we often talk about we need all of the above. We need all forms of energy to continue to propel us through the energy evolution. And I personally believe energy is always evolving.
Yeah, that's a good initial cross section there of a lot of different sources. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each of those? When you throw on that light switch in your house and it's coming from one of those sources, what's the good and bad of them all?
So as we've evolved in our use of energy, we've generally seen fuels that emit less in terms of greenhouse gases. That's really important, right? We need to manage our greenhouse gas impact, whether that's through methane directly or after combustion through CO2. And when we've, for example, moved from, I think it was back when I was in Sarnia that the Lambton Generating Station, which would be probably halfway between the refinery I was running and your cottage, was shut down. One of the last coal-fired generating stations in Ontario, that was a good move by the Ontario government to move off of coal, recognizing they had great nuclear resources, hydro resources to form a base load. And they moved towards natural gas for generating electricity, which was cleaner burning than coal. Another thing that they really focused on was wind and solar. Again, those are good forms of producing energy. We're in that business as Enbridge as well, that have come down in costs. I mean, that's what you do, is you invest in these things and you generate research and invest in the technology, and the costs come down. But the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. And they found that natural gas is helpful for managing the ups and downs. You don't really go up and down with a nuclear plant, as an example. And a little tough to do that with wind and solar, but gas provides that resiliency that's helpful. But it doesn't mean that it's something you rely on all the time. It's about it being there when you need it, and that's often how we think of the natural gas in our systems. Is we're there when you need it, and hopefully you don't need it that much. Another thing we haven't talked about, Chris, is energy efficiency. That's actually the single best thing you can do, is focus on the efficiency. There have been great advancements made in homes, but that's if you
Yeah,
are trying to reduce your footprint, that's another big one.
let
I
me
get
dig into
myself all
that.
excited and keep going on these
Yeah,
things.
no, it's great because you live in this world and you're so deep in it, and it's
Yeah.
lovely to get the stream of thought. But let's just talk about it from a homeowner. Like, you have to make choices, right? And
Mhm.
so you also talked about one of the formative influences on you was a house that had sort of a hybrid
Yeah.
energy option within their home.
So I think the first thing to focus on is making sure you have an energy efficient home, and that's in your windows, your insulation, the construction. That is the best thing you can do to simply be efficient. And the engineer in me always likes to see efficiency. Let's just not use that energy in the first place, not demand that energy in the first place. And then certainly in a place like Canada, what we believe in, if you have access to natural gas, is a hybrid system. So that gives you choices. That allows you, and that's usually where you pair say, an air or ground source heat pump that's generally run off of electricity, provides you heat in the winter and cooling in the summer. But you back it up with that natural gas furnace to ensure that on those coldest days you have the heat. The other thing, and what we're working on, is to provide the technology to give people the choice. So, as we know, electricity costs vary, but so in a place like Ontario does the energy mix. So, a day like today, it's above freezing, it's sunny, it's a beautiful day. I would guess, and I know you have the GridWatch app, we're
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
running
On my phone, I have a GridWatch app, which for my location or for Ontario, it'll tell me how much of mine is coming nuclear, how much is hydro, how much is gas, and it's kind of intriguing to see the daily cycle and then the as the weather comes and goes as well.
Exactly. So, what we see in the future and what we're working on is that we allow the consumer the choice. So the consumer can say, today I want to maximize my cost savings, or I want to maximize my energy efficiency and minimize my, say, greenhouse gas footprint. So today's a day when we're running primarily nuclear. It's a nice day. We've got hydro going. Ontario hasn't had to fire up the gas generation too much. So I'm going to focus on my electricity. But maybe another day it's very cold or what have you, or maybe it's very expensive, the electricity. It's about people having choices and understanding where their energy comes from. And then I think it's up to the folks to just decide what they would like to use.
So it really then comes down to individual choices, and when you multiply that times 40 million Canadians or whatever, approaching 400 million Americans, that really amplifies into huge impact as to what the infrastructure needs to be to support them, but also the using up of existing resources and the impact that it can have on the environment if we're burning coal or burning natural gas or using hydro or nuclear. So let's get it fundamental first. Is the cost of energy in the home, is the technology such that it's going to go up? Is it going to come down? Do you think it's going to be just sort of an extrapolation of where it is right now?
Well, I think there's a lot of smart people wrestling with that right now. I think that when we talk about those four prongs of security, resilience, safety, and affordability, or sustainability rather than affordability, if we over-index to any one, that's where you really start to run into trouble with the others. And when we focus on perhaps, I think one of the hot topics has been a focus around sustainability. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, certainly at Enbridge, we have net zero commitments, and as do I think any responsible operator. But by the same token, we have, as I said earlier, that commitment to keep people safe and warm in their homes. If the infrastructure isn't there or it's not maintained, we can't guarantee that reliability, that energy being there on that day that you really need it. And I would say that applies to the gas utilities and to the electric utilities. So I think as we move to electrify more, if we don't try and stay balanced, but keep those goals around sustainability, that's where we run risks of things becoming very expensive. You see it in parts of North America. The US Northeast is a good example where their electricity costs and energy costs have become very, very expensive. And in part because there's been a refusal to expand the natural gas network in the Northeast with a view that they'll get it from other sources. But in those coldest days, that's usually the most reliable source of energy.
And then you also mentioned net zero, and I've heard that term lots, but it's kind of two words, but it encompasses so much. What do you define as net zero when people have that, I think, as a commendable goal?
So using Enbridge as an example, we've made a commitment towards net zero from our operations by 2050. And what that means is that as we look to add things, and those things may lead to, so as we add customers, for example, in the gas utility, we'll have an assumption that they're going to burn X amount of gas, and we know that that releases CO2. So as we add those customers, we want to be looking to offset the impacts of our operations. So the compressors we run to move that gas, that sort of thing, offset the impact of those operations, so that by 2050 we haven't grown our impact to the environment, that we're finding things that helped. And that's, at least for us, not about necessarily planting more trees, but it's about looking at our operations and saying, how can we do this differently to minimize our footprint? I do think it's a very touchy term that lots of folks have different views on, but at its most fundamental, it's about looking and at what you're doing, the impact you have, whether it's as a customer, an operator, or even earlier up the pipeline, and saying, can I change my operations so that as I growth is always good. It's important. Our shareholders, like my mother-in-law, like to see growth, but can I offset that impact of what I'm doing?
So, what is a company like Enbridge, with you as the boss? What is your motivation? Because you've got to, I mean, you're a regulated utility, but you've, at the same time, you can't be operating at a loss. You've got to pay all your bills. So, is it the regulatory environment that gives you the motivation then to try and move closer and closer to net zero? Or how do you answer it on a daily and annual basis to the changes that you're making that probably won't make you more profitable?
I think it's about, so what really drives me, and I would say drives the company, is first and foremost our values as a company. So we as Enbridge talk a lot about safety, integrity, respect, inclusion, high performance as our values. How do we deliver consistently with those values? And when it comes to the energy mix, I have a lot of confidence in our ability to deliver for a long time to come. Enbridge Gas started 177 years ago in downtown Toronto with 12 gas street lamps. We have moved through a number of energy evolutions or transitions. I mean, and when I look at our other utilities, they're almost as they've been around almost as long. So when I think of an energy transition, I think of we actually started with coal gas and manufactured gas back 177 years ago, providing gaseous products to people for lighting, for heating their homes, that sort of thing. And once natural gas came through the main line that comes from Western Canada through Northern Ontario and down towards Toronto rather, that unlocked huge value for Ontario. The growth in natural gas infrastructure, in people putting their homes on natural gas, I'd say 75% of Ontario homes are heated with natural gas now. And it was a real shift, and it allowed for economic growth. It allowed for prosperity for the company. It allowed for affordable energy for Ontarians. It was very transformational. So as we look forward, then we
But
say,
also,
well,
just sorry for interrupting, but also an environmental improvement as well, from manufactured gas and coal to, obviously, it's not the dream solution to continue to be putting carbon dioxide into the air, but at the same
exactly.
time, you've got to keep people safe and warm in their homes. So that was measurable historical evolution from a more polluting to a less polluting situation through technology. And so and you did it, as you mentioned, it was for the good. It also was good for the good of the company. So how do you extrapolate that same process forward with all the new technologies that are coming and the desire to be net zero by 2050 or so?
Well, when I think about it, one of the fundamental things that I think about is we already have this infrastructure in the ground. It's there. It's been, for lack of a better word, bought and paid for by our ratepayers, by our customers over decades and decades and decades. So it's there. It provides reliable and resilient energy. So now, what do we do with that? Do we just abandon that, or do we figure out a way to use that? And we've been heavily involved in looking at what else could we do. So as an example, renewable natural gas is something that Enbridge is big into. We've actually spent billions of dollars in renewable natural gas over the broader Enbridge corporate structure. And that is looking at natural gas it's methane, again, that is naturally emitted from landfills. So food products, as they rot, emit methane. It's from dairy and other livestock and that sort of thing. I think you understand where I'm going
Yeah,
there.
from cows. I got it. Yeah, I grew up on a farm. I understand that. Yeah.
Exactly, lots of methane there. So how do we capture that? And renewable natural gas is great because it's basically, we talk about it as a drop-in fuel. It's the same thing. It's a CH4 molecule. It goes into the pipe and acts the same way. The other thing that we've done in Enbridge Gas, we're very proud to say we were the first to blend hydrogen into our system. Now, that's a more technically complex and expensive fuel, but it's there. And we've demonstrated in all of our utilities that it is something we can use. And it's very clean burning. It's an extremely clean gas. So at the end of the day, it goes back to me to customer choice. So what would you like in your systems? But it's about a choice. It's about folks understanding where their energy comes from and how they want to select what it is. Because at the end of the day, we're there to respond to what our we call them our ratepayers or our customers. What do they want? They're the ones who are paying for the system. Just make sure that they are making those decisions from a place of knowledge. So yes, when we talk about the gas system, that is certainly what I think about in terms of the future for it that's available to us.
Yeah, just an interesting aside, and maybe lots of folks know it, but friends of mine at a company called Planet have put up a satellite recently that they call Tanager, and all it does is look for places where methane and similar gases are leaking around the world. Because they're different than air, you can see them with certain types of looking at different parts of the spectrum. And so with your pipeline that's running all the way from Alberta to Toronto and across the country, you can't inspect every meter of it all the time, every day. And if there is a leak somewhere, and of course Canada's not the only country in the world, but what these satellites can do, there's also greenhouse gas GHG sat. They can real time monitor all around the world for where the most potent greenhouse gases are being leaked, including the natural sources. And do you ever receive that information? Does a company like Enbridge use that information?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, GHG SAT was founded by a classmate of mine from Queens in engineering. So he and I have talked about it quite a few times, and those are super valuable. I mean, let's be clear, though, from our perspective, no leaks are tolerable. So our view is that I think the industry used to tolerate a certain amount of leaks and say, well, it's manageable. That's not where we're going as a company, and I would say that's not where the industry is going. And that's through, in part, we want to make sure it never gets to a point it's leaking, but if it does, we want to be monitoring it and seeing it quickly. So you can see that through a number of means. The satellites are great for where there's larger plumes of methane. Certainly, I remember a few years ago, One of the, I think it was a NASA satellite that was up actually, and I was in a role as the chief operations officer for our big interstate pipelines in the U.S. and get this phone call saying they've seen a huge methane plume right by the pipeline up in a certain part of the Midwest, and do we have a leak or what's going on? So I'm phoning and the folks saying, what happened? Do we have a leak? What's going on? No, there was a huge dairy farm right next to it, and that was what they were seeing. But even dairy, responsible farmers are looking at how they capture that methane and don't let it be released. So it's a mix.
I want to pick on something. You mentioned that you have changed what you do about methane leaks. When you're doing maintenance, you don't just burp it up into the atmosphere. When you're changing a compressor, you just you actually have taken responsibility, probably more complex and expensive processes, but that's what you're doing. Just sort of quickly, how did that internal change happen? Was it through discussions and meetings? How did you make that happen?
It's all about doing the right thing. I think I talked about our values earlier, and it's, what's the right thing to do here? And I think helping our folks who actually operate the system are incredible. That's the conditions they work through sometimes when there's inclement weather, things like that. But they know how to operate the system best. So asking them, what can we do differently? And then they've innovated and come back with ideas. Because in some places that we operate, it's mandated to reduce your methane emissions. In other places, it isn't. But to us, if it's the right thing to do, it's simply the right thing to do. We've also, an example I might give you is we were looking at how compressors vent. This is a few years ago. I went to the CEO of one of the largest providers of these compressors globally.
Just a second, and you went to them?
Yes. Well, we were one of their biggest customers, so
cool.
they would take our role.
I want to hear quickly about that meeting. Then, how did that work?
Yeah, so was speaking to him and said, this is crazy. There's got to be a better way of doing this. I understand for safety reasons, we don't want to overpressure things, but there must be something different. And he said, we've been thinking about that and working on that. Would you be up for trying out what we're looking at doing and how we're thinking of doing this? And we did at one of our compressor stations in the U.S. Northeast near Boston. And now that technology is being rolled out across our system. And certainly every time we build something new, and we're looking at retrofitting the older stuff too. You have to ask. You ask the question, set the goal for folks, and it's amazing what they can come up with.
Yeah, and
we've also, to be clear, set goals around reducing our emissions as well, but this was probably even before that.
Sure. And I think in the public perception, there's like fossil fuels and there's clean fuels, but it's not black and white. Can you just and it probably frustrates you that they're viewed that way. There is some truth in it, of course, but nothing's perfect. But how do you see it rather than just simple fossil fuels, clean fuels? How do you explain it to yourself? How do you view it?
The word that comes to mind when you say that is responsible. Are we being responsible with what we do? Are we looking at things from the perspective of both the near term and the long term? I often say sustainable isn't only about the environment, but it's also about the economy. It's about families. It's about communities. So how do we balance all of those pieces we need to have? And how can we be responsible operators? And I think one of the first steps is, of course, it's about keeping people safe and warm in their homes. That's fundamental. But how else can we be responsible? Well, we can be innovative and figure out how to capture, for example, methane emissions. And the industry is changing to reflect that. Now, we do have some jurisdictions that are heavily regulated. I'm not sure that helps a lot. Obviously, you need regulation, you need incentive, you need goals to get you there. But at the end of the day, one of the reasons I'm so proud to work in this industry is I really believe from wells to burner tip, we are the most responsible producers and users of energy in the world here in North America. And we shouldn't at all be embarrassed about what we do. And we should continue to set the goals that we've set to get better and better all the time. That's just what good companies, good industries do.
Thanks. I want to finish by heading to the future. Just one quick question. You're the leader of a large gas company, and that's going to trigger a reaction in a lot of people. What's the hardest part about being the leader of a large gas company?
I'll go back to keeping people safe. I mean, there's 7,000 employees in Enbridge Gas across North America, probably as many contractors working for us every day, and there's 7 million home, schools, and business we bring that gas to. That is the thing that preoccupies my mind more than anything, is making sure that we keep those people and those communities are safe. There's nothing more important we do. And I think with that is then the unintended consequence as I would call it that pendulum swings back and forth. And how can we get to more rational, moderate, middle of understanding it's a balance? And if we can stay there, a few years ago, I think the sentiment's changed a bit now. It probably will pendulum swing again. But a few years ago, there was such a push around there was no future for natural gas infrastructure. Let's get that out of the ground. I'm thinking to myself, how are we going to keep people safe and warm in their homes? How are we going to do this? I mean, that's what drives me personally every day. And I would say that drives the vast majority of the folks who work for us.
Okay, given all of that, and I appreciate the frankness, with the best of technology that we developed so far, with carbon capture as well, how clean can it get? What limitations are we up against?
Sure. So we've talked about a whole suite of tools that will help enable electrification as we see society going. And that's something that's super important that we enable, whether that's through natural gas, through wind, through solar, through nuclear, through hydro, whatever that might be. But I think what we haven't talked about is the role of things like AI. We can get really smart about how we manage things and use existing assets, existing infrastructure, and make it work better. So think of, I mentioned earlier, can you toggle between using gas and your heat pump, electricity for how you heat and cool your home, depending on what you're trying to do? Well, now bring that forward to thinking, can you use your home as an energy source and go back out onto the grid? We have these concepts of smart grids and microgrids. Imagine you're powering you've plugged in your EV, the battery's fully charged. Well, now there's an opportunity to pull from that battery at certain times. And if you look at the Ontario Independent Electricity System Operator, they're looking heavily at how they can do things like that. So a real opportunity, I think, around technologies that make a home's energy system work together. I mentioned before, we've worked on apps to do that, get the heat pump and the furnace going. Again, energy efficiency, build those homes better every day. Now, I live in a 150-year-old farmhouse, but we're trying to make it as efficient as possible too.
So from 150-year-old to the future, 25 years ago was the year 2000, not that long ago.
I know.
So what changes can we expect? And how can we be moving towards the goal of net zero? What's going to happen? What's Enbridge look like in 25 years?
So certainly, I think it's using those advanced technologies and AI to balance what you're using and enable those choices you have around the energy you use. I think it's energy efficiency, help our energy consumers use less energy. We've got to keep evolving what's in the pipe. So that pipe's there, that infrastructure's there, but renewable natural gas, hydrogen, things like that. There's what we call behind the meter. So those are the energy systems like solar panels and things like that you can use to also provide yourself that energy. And then I think generative AI could really be transformative. Certainly the efficiency side of things, learning how people use things. I mean, I don't know how it'll ever really factor in how my husband likes the house and how I like the house, but it can learn our patterns for sure. These are big, complex systems. So one of the things we're really working on is, can we make the gas system and the electricity system work better together? The current Minister of Energy here in Ontario is really focused on us doing that. So how are we planning together to be as effective and efficient versus planning in isolation, making sure we're incorporating those renewables, the nuclear, the gas, all of it, thinking of it as this ecosystem. And then we just need to keep innovating. And I do think I think folks think of the energy business as kind of boring and that sort of thing. It's actually an incredibly innovative industry, and we need to keep focusing on that as well.
One of the greatest phases of life is not just having children, but having grandchildren. My granddaughter Ren was born just less than 2 weeks ago, and I think about her future, and I picture Ren buying her first home or moving into her first apartment, and when she is signing the contract for power or moving the thermostat on the wall, if in my mind, we will have made the technological advances so that we can do what the sun has been doing effortlessly for 4 or 5 billion years. And that is harnessing not just nuclear power, but the fusion power, not nuclear fission, but nuclear fusion, so that there is an incredibly compact source of electricity that, if you can burn the right fuels, has almost no polluting side to it, so that she can not only be warm and safe in her home, but she can be relatively carefree with the impact that she's having on the environment when she decides she's a little bit cold and needs to turn the temperature up. That's my vision of an ideal energy future. Michele, what's yours?
Well, I think if I imagine Ren walking into her first apartment or first home in 25 years, I hope she doesn't have to touch the thermostat. I hope that it knows when she comes in who she is, what she prefers, and that it sets the temperature for her, that it sources that energy from a place she wants it to be, that's consistent with her values, and that, I agree with you, is moving us towards a place of a truly sustainable future for her grandchildren.
You carry a lot of responsibility in an issue that gets a lot of public scrutiny, and I thank you for it. I thank you also, Michele, for your time today, for the work that you're doing on a daily basis for our energy future, and for keeping so many people cool in summer and warm in winter and energy safe. Thanks for being on the podcast.
No, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Today, we talked about how did we get here and what's next. And it's not going to be as quick a transition as I would like or as anyone would like. But we have the obligation to keep people safe, cool, and warm as needed, to use the infrastructure that exists, but to relentlessly and quickly as possible move towards the future that we need to keep this all sustainable for everybody. And maybe as a call to action, I'm going to quote Buckminster Fuller, a famous historic figure, who said, "We are called to be the architects of the future, and not its victims. How can we make the choices that allow us to be the architects of our future and not the victims of the future?" Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I remind you, in addition to thinking about energy and energy production and distribution, I also remind you how important it is to have your own personal dreams and to make daily decisions that move you closer and closer to those dreams. And most of all, to find the energy every single day to enjoy this amazing ride. I'm Chris Hadfield on Energy.
Chris Hadfield on Energy is brought to you in part by Enbridge. For many decades, Enbridge has safely and reliably delivered the energy that helps power homes, industries, and communities. Today, they're investing in the energy systems that fuel people's quality of life. Life takes energy. That's why Enbridge is shaping a better energy future, because tomorrow is on. Find out more at enbridge.com.